I have spent 29 years working with charts. I know how errors look. I know how corrections look. I know the difference between a blank that was drawn and a blank that was left. The blank at human space was not drawn. It was not left. I did not understand what that meant until the third week of the audit, when I pulled the predecessor files and understood that the blank had been arriving, consistently and without instruction, for longer than my commission has existed. I should explain the audit. Every 40 cycles, the Valthari Cartographic Commission conducts a formal revision review, a procedural sweep of all standing sector classifications to confirm that the notation methodology matches current commission standards. Standard work. I have run 4 of these in my tenure. They produce nothing of interest. You verify the notation, you verify the authorization signatures, you append a compliance stamp, you file the record closed. The blank at human space has appeared in every revision review I have participated in. I have stamped it 4 times. I assumed, as my predecessors assumed, that the authorization lived somewhere upstream in the founding archive, a designation inherited from whoever drew the original charts before the commission absorbed them. It was not a question I had ever thought to ask. In the 31st cycle review I asked it, not because anything seemed wrong, because my junior surveyor, Pelrev, asked me why the sector carried no revision history, not even a founding notation, and I realized I did not have an answer. I pulled the founding archive. The blank was not in it, or rather, the blank was there in the founding charts, but it carried no notation, no signature, and no origin date. It had been present in the charts the commission inherited when it was established. The blank predated us. I assumed this meant the blank had been inherited from whichever regional authority the commission absorbed at its founding. I traced the lineage. The regional authority had inherited the charts from the Solvith Meridian surveying body, which had operated for 600 years before the commission's charter. I requested the Meridian archive through the Interagency Lending Registry. It arrived in 11 days. The blank was in the Meridian charts, no signature, no origin date, no revision history. The Meridian had itself inherited its base charts from a pre-consolidation network of independent survey guilds operating under no common authority, the Consortium of the Outer Reaches, dissolved approximately 1,400 years ago. Reconstructing the consortium's records required letters to 4 separate institutional archives and 1 private collector of historical cartography. The process took most of the 3rd week. The blank was in every recovered consortium chart, every guild, every independent survey team operating in that era, the same boundary, the same notation-free margin, the same absence of any hand that drew it. I sat with that for a long time. The consortium's charts were themselves derived from still older source material, pre-consortium route maps used by early intersystem traders and explorers, some of them predating formal cartographic methodology by 7 or 8 centuries. Reconstructing those was harder. Fragments mostly, partial grids, sections of survey logs transcribed into later documents by historians who had not understood what they were copying. But the blank was there, in every fragment that covered the relevant sector, in every partial grid. The boundary held across 4,000 years of charting, across 3 incompatible mapping systems that used different coordinate references, different notation standards, different scales. The sector that is now designated human space had been left unmarked, without explanation or signature, in every map any civilization in this region of the galaxy had produced, for as long as any civilization in this region had produced maps. That was not the part that stopped me. The part that stopped me came when I began cross-referencing the revision histories of those earlier charts, looking for instances where a surveyor had attempted to fill in the blank, to chart the sector, to send instruments in and record what they found. There were 14 such attempts across the 4,000-year span. I found records of 11 of them. 3 I could only verify had occurred because a later chart carried a correction entry in the margin, a notation that the boundary designation had been restored to blank following an unauthorized revision. In all 11 documented cases, the charts corrected themselves, not through administrative order, not through a supervising cartographer's intervention. The correction appeared in the next edition of the chart, in the same notation style as the surrounding entries, as if the chart itself had decided that the sector should remain unmarked and had quietly done so. In 2 of the 11 cases, the surveyor who had attempted to fill in the blank did not file a subsequent report. I do not know what became of them. The records do not say. The absence in the records is clean, not redacted, not annotated with a notation of inquiry, simply absent. As if the surveyor had walked out of the institutional record the same way the sector data had walked out of the chart. I spent a full day on those 2 cases. I found a name for one of them, a guild cartographer working in the pre-consortium era, operating under a regional survey license. I found the license. I found the preliminary field notes. I did not find anything filed after the 4th week of the survey mission. The mission had been a solo instrument deployment, an unmanned probe dispatched to the sector boundary to take spectral readings. The probe had returned. The doc receipt was in the archive. The data had been downloaded, then nothing. The cartographer's name was on no subsequent document I could find in any archive that period. I noted this in my audit log and moved on. I thought for a time that I was looking at a pattern of institutional suppression, some ancient authority enforcing the blank through quiet administrative correction across centuries. I looked for that authority. I could not find it. The corrections crossed jurisdictional lines, crossed the gaps between successor organizations, crossed the dissolution of the consortium itself. Whatever made the correction was not operating through any institution I could identify. I considered a simpler explanation, that the blank had propagated through habit, that each new mapping body had simply copied the boundary from its predecessors without questioning it, and that the apparent self-correction was an artifact of that habit, surveyors choosing without being told to restore what had always been there. Pelrev asked me what the instruments had returned from the 11 attempts, what data, if any, had been recorded before the correction. I looked. The instruments had returned normal readings, stars, dust, the ordinary contents of a sector of space. There was nothing in the data to explain why a surveyor would leave a sector blank, or why a subsequent edition would erase what had been recorded there. I closed the data files and sat in the chart room for a while without turning on the overhead light. The stars outside the observatory window were familiar. I have looked at them for 29 years. The sector in question is not visible from this latitude, but I know which direction it sits. I did not look in that direction. What I know at the end of this audit is the following. The blank has never been authorized by any body I can find a record of. The blank has been present in every map this region of space has produced for 4,000 years. 14 attempts to fill it were made. 11 ended in correction. 2 surveyors did not report afterward. The instruments found nothing that should produce a blank. I filed the amendment this morning. Standard revision record. The blank at human space is formally reaffirmed as a standing sector classification, notation-free, authorization pending further archival research. Compliance stamp appended. Record closed. I added one notation of my own to the internal audit log, where it will not appear in the public revision record. It is not a conclusion. It is a description of what I found, stated as precisely as I know how to state it. The notation reads, "The line was not put here by anyone we know. It appears to have been put here by whatever decided it should be here. We have been copying it for 4,000 years without understanding that we were not the ones who drew it." Pelrev asked me, before I sealed the file, whether I was going to recommend that the commission investigate the source of the blank. Commission a formal inquiry, contact the other institutional archives, Attempt to identify what produced the correction pattern. I told her no. I told her to stamp her copy of the compliance record and to begin the next sector review. She did not ask again. She is a good surveyor. She understands, I think, that there are questions the work does not require you to ask, and that knowing you should not ask them is part of knowing how to do the work. The record is closed, the blank holds, it has always held. I do not know who put it there. I no longer think anyone did.